and welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we are going to be looking at practice 1 and 2, but not quite breaking because it happened a few hours ago. But Daniel Ricciardo is pretty much out for the Dutch Grand Prix, going to be replaced by Liam Lawson. More on that in a bit, but he's out with a broken hand. But let's get into practice number 1, where, surprise, surprise, at his home Grand Prix, Max Verstappen fastest, Alonso second, Hamilton third. What was interesting, though, is Lewis Hamilton was on a really fast lap. Just towards the end of the session, we had obviously Nico Hülkenberg had crashed towards in the last sector. Then Hamilton had to abandon his lap, despite being a good couple of tenths up in that final sector. So the time he did do in practice 1 was not as good as it could have been. However, Max Verstappen looking good. Alonso being quite close as well. George Russell not really feeling it, was he? If I'm honest, if you're a George Russell fan, but even more not feeling it was Lance Stroll that had a problem and didn't even go out. We had Robert Schwartzman as well in the Ferrari going out for his run, doing okay. The problem is, I mean, yes, he finished 19th, but you never really know what the team is doing, how much fuel he has in, what engine mode they are in. So I guess he did 25 laps, which is quite a good number compared, averagely compared to most of the others. So not bad. Also, any surprises? Well, Perez, he was nearly half a second off Max Verstappen. He did a few laps less, 27 to Max Verstappen's 31. Not particularly promising, really. Bear in mind it's such a short lap. Lando Norris in 6th, but more than him in a bit. Logan Sargent managed 7th, which is not too bad in FP1. George Russell all the way down there, as I mentioned, in 11th, but apparently they are trying 2 very different setups. But that gap's bigger, I think, isn't it? But it's bigger than Verstappen and Perez, which might not be too great for some people. But that was essentially our first practice session, where we had Nico Hülkenberg crash out. And unfortunately, I'd imagine Günther Steiner probably wasn't the happiest, because when he did crash out, that was a brand new front wing, I believe, which he damaged. So I think he needs to buy cake for his engineers. Oscar Piastri, 8th. So 2 McLarens comfortably in the top 10. 2 Red Bulls obviously comfortably in the top 10. And obviously Aston Martin having that problem. Ricciardo, 13th. Obviously Tsunoda, 9th. There was a couple of tenths between them, so not too bad. But with that broken wrist, that could change quite a lot, couldn't it? Leclerc down in 16th for Ferrari as well. So let's get on to free practice 2. Some people say practice 2 means a bit more. Free practice 1, because you got Zandvoort, and there's lots and lots of sand there. Really, really dusty, kind of like Bahrain. And the circuit really rubbers up quite nicely. The only other thing you have in terms of rubbering up, they've got Formula 2 there as well, but no Formula 3. And it's really, really sandy because it's right next to the beach. It's a really stunning location. So, free practice 2, where we have Lando Norris fastest by 23 thousandths of a second, or 200ths, over 200ths of a second, doing about 30 laps. Verstappen in 2nd. You do have to wonder, that even Loris came out initially and said that they feel that Red Bull always hold back a bit until obviously the qualifying day tomorrow. But still, you've got to be happy if you're Lando. You have to be happy. Verstappen 2nd, Albon 3rd. I mean, Albon less than 3 tenths off Norris's. That Williams is looking really good, especially in the hands of Albon. If you remember, going back to free practice number 1, Logan Sargent didn't look too bad either. I mean, 7 tenths off. So Yuki Tsunoda up there in 5th as well. And obviously, yes, something happened to his teammate, didn't it? Which we'll get into in a second. Hamilton 4th. He did say, I think, in an interview, that he seemed to be happier in FP1 with the car than they did in FP2. He felt like they lost a bit in FP2. But on the race runs, Lando Norris looking good. But once again, Red Bull looking the best. Mercedes possibly looking a bit better than McLaren. But a lot of people have been saying that this is potentially could be the race where Red Bull get beat. It's either going to be here or maybe Interlagos. It's a difficult one. I think something's going to have to go a bit wrong for Red Bull to be beat. This is Max Verstappen's home track, and we know, even with that intense pressure both in 21 and 22, he's delivered the goods. Albeit in 22, it did look a bit doubtful when that safety car came out. which if you remember the safety car came out, which AlphaTauri helped out with a lot. I think they said, was it Sonoda they sent out, knowing that there was something wrong with the car and he stopped out on track, ergo the safety car. Conspiracy theorists, put your tinfoil hats on, but there we go. But he won anyway, in what was, to be fair, quite an entertaining race. So Gasly up there in 6th, not looking too bad. Perez again in 7th, about half a second off. This is the problem. If that gap can, because this is such a short track, you're looking at a 111. So let's be honest, pole position is going to be in the 110s, maybe even the 19s, but certainly in the 10s, assuming the weather holds out. There is, once again, as we spoke yesterday in our preview show, there's predicted rain. But Max, half a second between the two, pretty much. I mean, you've got to start to wonder that if that ends up, for example, and that could end up being the qualifying. What an amazing race we could have. But if that ends up being the qualifying, you have to start being disappointed again in Perez. I know he's got the rest of the season to go, but I think Ricciardo breaking his wrist is probably the best thing to happen to Perez, because does it then take the pressure off? Now, talking about Ricciardo, he's down there in 20th, 1.7. He only did 7 laps. What happened is Piastri lost it at one of the really high bank turns, just at the end of the first sector, beginning of the second, around there. And then Ricciardo didn't go off in sympathy. The flags waving, he just kind of like lost it. You could make an argument maybe he should have been going slow. I don't know. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Fact is, he has hurt his hand. And let's have a look at it. On Sky F1, Danny Ricciardo ruled out of the Dutch Grand Prix after breaking a bone in his hand. In the crash. Ricciardo suffered the injury after crashing during the second practice of the Dutch Grand Prix. Liam Lawson will replace Ricciardo for the remainder of the week. So there's Ricciardo. I mean, there's essentially Ricciardo getting out. He was holding his hand as well when he got out. He even took his glove off. He's been replaced by Liam Lawson, as we know. In this bizarre incident, Ricciardo drove his AlphaTauri into the barrier at turn 3. He was forced to take evasive action, having appeared to be late in noticing the stricken McLaren of Oscar Piastri that had crashed at the corner moments later. Now, Ricciardo appeared to suffer the injury during the impact with the barrier, complaining of damage to his hand over the team radio before struggling to get out of the car as he held his left arm to his chest. An AlphaTauri statement has come out and said, after today's incident during free practice 3 in Zandvoort, in which Danny Ricciardo hit the barrier at turn 3, he was brought to the local hospital and further examinations were carried out. An X-ray confirmed that he sustained a break to the metacarpal on his left hand, and this injury will not allow him to continue his duties, so he'll be replaced by the team's reserve driver, Liam Lawson, for the rest of this weekend. There we go here. There was a poor Piastri in there. There's unfortunately Daniel Ricciardo in that picture there. And it looked like he was holding the steering wheel. And then unfortunately, that's how, keeping the steering wheel, how he broke his hand, I imagine. You'll quite often see in crashes that drivers take their hands off the steering wheel, kind of protect their chest or whatever. But the important thing is, and I think what a lot of drivers are told early on, albeit I'm not one of them, a driver, so let's be a competitive driver, let's say, they do take their hands. I think they're taught to take their hands off the steering wheel following a crash. The teams obviously wish him the best. The team wishes the best for a quick recovery. And Liam Lawson, who appeared in 2 practice sessions for AlphaTauri last season, along with one for the senior team, will make his F1 debut. He's a neighbour to Ricciardo, as he's a 21-year-old New Zealand. But we'll get onto, because motorsport.com have got an article about who is Liam Lawson, Ricciardo's replacement. Well, we know he's 21, and we know that he took part in some F1 practice sessions last year, 2 for AlphaTauri, 1 for Red Bull. And he serves as the reserve driver for both Red Bull and the AlphaTauri team. And he currently races for Team Mugen in Super Formula, where he is second in the standings. And he's won 3 races so far this year in his first season in the Japanese series. And it's a really competitive series out of Japan. I mean, you've got people like racing in Japan, like Eddie Irvine, and I think Ralf Schumacher as well, to name but a few, being, racing in Japan. Now, prior to Super Formula, he raced in Formula 2 in 21 and 22. First with the High-Tech Grand Prix, before moving to Roden Carlin for his second season. He finished 9th in his rookie year with 1 win, 3 podiums, 1 pole position, and he took a sole victory on debut in the Bahrain sprint race. Now, also in 21, he contested the DTM and narrowly missed out on the title, driving for Red Bull AF course in a hotly contested campaign alongside Alex Albon. Now, he finished second after becoming an innocent victim of an opening lap collision triggered by his championship rival Kelvin van der Linde in the final race at the Noise Ring. With his Ferrari suffering severe suspension damage and lapping the rest of the field, the Kiwi helplessly watched on as Maximilian Götz snatched the title from his grasp. Poor guy. Now, in his second F2 season, he finished 3rd in the standings, well done, behind Felipe Drugovich and runner-up Theo. I'm going to get that last name wrong, I'm not even going to try. Winning 4 races and scoring 10 podiums. Now, before graduating to F2, he spent 2 years in Formula 3, took 2 podiums in his rookie season with MP Motorsport and finishing 11th overall. So, I mean, I'm not going to completely just go on about the article, but he's obviously not too bad. He hasn't won too many titles recently, let's say, but the fact that he's second in Super Formula, I think definitely bodes well. It's going to be a big test this weekend. Now, we all know what Nick de Vries did last year for Monza, down at Monza for Williams. He ended up getting hired by AlphaTauri. Could he do the same thing? Be interesting, isn't it? It's the worst thing that could have happened to Ricciardo. So I truly hope he's back. But I do believe we've got a race next week. So that's potentially going to be an issue for him, isn't it? To be able to come back. But we know Lance Stroll drove with, issues in his wrist as well. So it is possible. I mean, let's hope he does. Then, if Daniel does come back too early and looks really, really slow against Sonoda, that's not going to look good either. I mean, poor Ricciardo, worst timing. So, Mercedes are right with Red Bull as Lewis Hamilton places target. Now, Lewis Hamilton believes Mercedes are right in the ballpark to fight with the outright quickest teams at the Dutch Grand Prix. Let's close that somewhat distracting, let's say at the very least, advert. Yeah, Hamilton's finished Friday's track time at Zandvoort in 4th place overall in FP2, just over 3/10 away from the pace set by Norris. The action at the front, as we know, was very close. Norris just pipping Verstappen by, the hundredths. Now, a beaming Hamilton who came into the weekend with a goal of beating Perez to 2nd place. He said he was very pleased. He said, it was great. He said, I woke up this morning so excited to get in the car. FP1 was actually a really good session for us. The car's been good from the get-go. It's great work from everyone at the factory. We made some changes over FP1 and FP2. It wasn't good, but it's good data to have. Now, trying to gauge whereabouts Mercedes are in the pecking order, Hamilton went on to say, so we've got some work to do tonight. If we can turn it around for tomorrow, he said. We're there or thereabouts. We're not as quick as the Red Bulls, and obviously McLaren were really quick, so we've got some work to do. As for where he feels Mercedes are lacking compared to the outright fastest, Hamilton said he suspects it's the first sector of the lap is the main culprit. It's a little bit everywhere, he said. McLaren were much quicker, he mentioned in the first sector, but he said on the long run, it's tyre overheating, which I think everyone's had. It's trying to make sure you extract most from those tyres and get tyres into the right window to start your lap. I think we've been slow in the first sector, but good in the last sector, so just trying to find the right balance. And looking at FP2, you've got to think Max Verstappen, home, probably favourite. I think he got pole there in 21-22. I do think it could be one of the just as close as Hungary. So if he wasn't going to get pole position, I don't think I wouldn't say it's going to be a surprise, but you wouldn't expect it. I think he's going to get pole in the win. I think Lando will run him pretty close. Hamilton could do, but I think normally that Mercedes is quicker in the race, although it hasn't been in the last few races. Even at Hungary, if you remember, it definitely wasn't. He definitely didn't have the second fastest car in that race, and nor he did Belgium really. And hopefully tomorrow we get a few answers. Can Lando beat Verstappen for pole? How much can Lewis Hamilton get in the mix? Because a lot of people have said overtaking is quite hard here. It is, but with DRS, we've seen it. I mean, Verstappen passed Hamilton for the lead last year. can also, I mean, can Albon get in that top 10 for Williams, get in Q3? That'd be amazing. What can the Aston Martins do after what's really been quite a disappointing few races? And George Russell, what's going on with him? He's like 6/10 down. I mean, all these questions hopefully are going to be asked tomorrow. So I guess watch FP3 if you want, but then stay tuned for qualifying. And this is the hot lap. And after qualifying, we'll have our qualifying review. So I'll see you next time.